Masterclass. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another Masterclass from the core at HTU. We're delighted to have our friend, colleague, collaborator, Viren Lall. He's joining us from England, and he's going to be talking about the art of pricing. To give you some context, Viren is actually well acquainted with the region. So he's worked across the MENA and the GCC. He works in India as well. And on the east side, he works also in Tokyo. He is the managing director of Change Schools, and Change Schools has a mission to democratize elite education within the entrepreneurship and innovation spectrum. So they work in Africa and all over the world, really giving access to underprivileged and people with less access to elite education in entrepreneurship. He is also executive instructor at London Business School. That's where he got his executive MBA with distinction, with a focus on strategy. And he's worked with BT Technologies. Viren has been around, and Viren has seen a lot, and he's comfortably able to cross linguistic, cultural barriers to get the point across. So without further ado, Viren, thank you so much for joining us today. And just a reminder for everybody, the core cohort beta, you are able to schedule one-on-one coaching with Viren should you need to discuss any kind of very specific things, and that happens through Nadine by filling out the form. So without further ado, again, Viren, thank you again. It's lovely to see you, and always great to be collaborating with you. So the floor is all yours, my friend.
Thank you, guys. Right, let me get Zoom back on. Okay, Dania needs to be admitted, Nadine. Fantastic. You can bring her in. Okay, guys, pricing. You're here for pricing. Just put down in chat something that might be concerning you about how do you price your innovation. I'm sure it's not the price of what's happening in the supermarkets. I'm sure it's pricing as to you want to get something out there. Anything that is a particular concern or dilemma or challenge you face about pricing, just put that in chat. Just want to get a context of where you guys are. Unless everything about pricing in your life is sorted. Is it sorted? Good, right, good. Look into competitors. Thank you, Yamana. Very important. In fact, we'll just break into that pretty quickly. Who else? What else? If it's only competition we're thinking of, then we'd be pretty much done in 15 minutes. So I need a little more help from you guys. Omar, Amer, Motaz. Fair value for customer service we're offering. So there's something about fairness, fair value, quality. And is it about, can I just check, Amir, is it about pricing for quality or being able to charge for that? What do we need to do for customer value drivers? Price for added value. So this little more on value added. And Nadine, if I missed anything, just shout it out to me, yeah? Because I'm looking at a different screen for that. Revenue models, how about quality out there? Okay, great. Okay, fair to say we'll cover pretty much most of it in our little session today out there. Competition is one that really sort of bothers people a lot. So let's just pick up with that. That seems to be one of the most important things. I'm going to start the whole process and hopefully, let me just check. I should be on a double desktop. Just bear with me 1 second. Can you see my screen? Right, cool. Here are typical concerns that we find about the competition, competitors, that's enough, innovation, pricing, how do we price for value, how do we keep margin, those are the things, those are the sort of general bits of feedback that we get out here. Put differently, these are the general buckets in which things land up in, right? So dealing with competition, value for money concerns, benchmarking and testings on the competition side. Strategy is really, how do you avoid taking missteps in pricing? Because sometimes when you price into the market, it's hard to retract and change pricing, especially if you've signaled a particular price. And some of you really talked about value pricing, value added, fair pricing. That was one of the first things I think Amer and Murtaz said, right? Fair pricing. How do you do, what is fair pricing in this particular context? So I'm going to put you out, and Nadine, by all means, we've got small groups. I think groups of 2 would be just fair enough. Yeah, would that be all right? Right. Dealing with the competition, is it a problem? So Nadine's just going to set us up for 5 minutes in a breakout room. Try and discuss what is the problem with competition to your pricing, and then come back and we'll share the most important thing you guys chatted or discovered or agreed on. That'd be cool. Yeah, let's go. I'll come off share. And I will put this in chat as well. You're already in the breakout room. You've got the gig. And I'll jump around. We'll get into the rooms. I'm just going to bring my phone here in case you need to communicate with this. There we go. Right. I'm going to go to just join the breakout rooms. Yeah. You're welcome to come off mute, ladies and gentlemen. We're all back. Right. So who wants to go first? Room 1. What do we come around with? Amer found it fun. We'll come to you, Amer. Good. So who were the people in room 1?
Ali, Dania, Murtaz.
We're not. Yes, I just was. We're not sure of the numbering. That's why we did not give attention for the room number. Anyways,
don't worry. I'll shout it out. So it's Ali, Dania, Murtaz.
Yes, thank you. Actually, our major point of discussion was how competition could limit your profit margin and makes you always price or push your price to be lower because you need to keep the competition in the market. And sometimes you need to recalculate your internal, let's say, operational cost or product cost, so to make sure that you have no issues with your, let's say, internal structure. And then you should make always a point by adding a real value or a real need, so the customers will neglect what kind of differences in the price there is and still make your product or your service their choice.
Lovely. So if I understand, if I can replay back what you've said, if I can just summarize back what you said, just so that my understanding is clear. What you're saying is that competitors' pricing sets a boundary as to how much you can charge, and the other thing you think is how do you put enough value on the table so that you can counteract that. That's great, thank you. Then let's get into. I still seem to be in room 2, but anyway, Amir and Yamama, what was your take?
Yeah, okay. So we discussed like 3 points. The first point was when you compete with like an indirect competitor, whether it's a different market or a different language. So can you set your pricing strategy based on them, although they are indirect competitor, but they are the closest competitor to you? This is the main problem or challenge. The second point we discussed is the price discrimination based on region.
That was my words, yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly your words. I loved it and I added, and I will always use it. So like what if you have like different, you have the target audience in different countries, can you set the same price for everyone? And the third point was the experience. So what if you compete or you compete with a company that has been in the market like for 10 years, so you don't know their original or their first pricing strategy. So how can you base your strategy based on them?
Lovely, thank you for that. Out there. Let me just pick this one up. What do you mean by indirect competition? Because I don't quite understand the term. What is indirect competition?
Yeah. So for example, I would have my startup as an example. So we are in the content industry, but in the Arabic content. So what if our competitor is the English content platform? So we consider them as indirect because of the language. So can we base our strategy, like can we plan a strategy based on them?
Okay, is their product, sorry, just understanding before even answering, this is just that understanding is clear when you say indirect competition. Is their product or service being consumed by the same set of customers? Or is it a completely different customer
We
set?
do have like in common target audience. Like Arabic users, for sure they look for English content.
Right. So what you're saying is that you are selling into the same customer space. Is that correct? Potentially.
Not the same, but like part of them. Yeah.
Part of them, right? But yeah, but similar, right? Because the customer space is much bigger than the market that you can address. I'm just trying to understand, right? So it's like a similar product.
Yeah.
Right? And is it also possible that your customer, because of pricing, because they've only got that much money to spend, has a choice whether they go for English, Arabic, or both, or their product, your product, or both?
No, I don't think the price will be the main element. I think it's the language itself and the content.
Right. So, okay. So you're offering a different value proposition. Your question, if I may replay it back to you, is can I use a similar product, right? A similar product or indirect competition as a benchmark, yeah? As a pricing benchmark.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Thank you. Right. The next room, which is Caroline, Naeem, and Yazan, if you were in there.
Yeah. We discussed since we have an intangible product, we're selling service basically via our platform because we're senior and executive talent platform. We do the matchmaking between businesses and consultants. We're always in a situation where we need to justify the pricing, and we feel that the customers always they have the right to negotiate the pricing because the product is intangible. So this is what I find it really challenging, and sometimes I feel it's very specialty of the Middle East region. So this is what we've discussed.
Yeah, no, and I know it's peculiar in MENA and GCC because there's always sort of comparison and the cost out. Yeah.
Yeah, if I may add something, because
Yeah,
I
yes,
was telling Caroline and then we got cut off. I was suggesting that if the market has that tendency to factor that into the strategy. So, preempt that. So have an ace up your sleeve already for when somebody comes, tells you, yeah, but hey, we're a new company, we don't have a lot of money, give us a price discount. So maybe you can have something up your sleeve already and factor that into the pricing if this is a huge concern. So just kind of a suggestion.
Excellent. So this is, yes, you're getting sort of kind of bargained down. Yeah. And then your suggestion is ace up the sleeve. And the last room, Jumana Kamal Omar.
Yes, yeah, this is Kamal. We discussed almost the same points, but we have two main points we want to highlight. The first problem with competitive pricing is it, and we don't know, is it based on a calculated strategy, or it's we are competing with a competitor who put pricing from his mind. So this is one point. And the other is the issue if the customer is not well educated, so he can compare pricing based on the price of the material and not the value of the product. So this is the second point as well.
Your mic is quite noisy, by the way, so I'll just keep that in mind.
Right. So can I just pick up on the last bit, Kamal, just so that I just to replay if I understood correctly. You're saying that your customer might come back to you and say, why are you pricing X when your bill of materials is A plus B plus C? Is that what you're saying? Right. Okay. Cool. Omar?
Yeah, what Kamal was trying to say, he was talking about us. Actually, we are an IoT company, so we are selling software and hardware. All of our competitors are from China, so there is no way to compete in the hardware price. Their price will be always lower. So our value, our real value, is in the software. Now, you can't build large products if you are running just hardware, but you can do that if you have software. Now, when we are selling our product, we are selling meters of glass. We are a smart glass company. We're selling meters of glass. So every meter has to have a price. Now, how can we tell our customers, you are paying for the software plus the hardware, but we are pricing based on meters. This was the hardest job to do in our startup. Pricing is the biggest headache in our startup, because we're selling based on meters of hardware, but our real value is in software. Yeah.
Got it. Right. Your real value added software. So let me pick one or 2 points which may not be particularly on my sort of agenda to cover, but I think it's really, really important because they're sort of easily dealt with as some of the things that come. And I just want, sorry, no, before I jump over myself, we had a room 5. So we had Homam and Khalid.
Yeah, sorry, maybe I was waiting for Homam to jump in, but I can do that. So, well, it's competition is, yeah, this is Khalid speaking. So definitely competition will devalue the value that any company would, the service offering you are doing. Well, it's when it comes to service. If we are, let's say, delivering a service, unlike a product, so talking about myself for sure, I don't know about, maybe I didn't have the chance to understand what Homam company is offering. However, competition, when it comes, it's when it's unfair, definitely that will devalue what the service you are offering. So it is, yeah, I think it has to be looked at very carefully.
Lovely.
Yeah,
we have to. So basically, what we're saying is competition is a fierce thing. It sort of ties us down. We have to look at it very carefully, and has potential to sort of be ruinous to our pricing strategy. Would that be fair to say? Most of the things that are coming up, apart from the other bits and pieces that we've discussed, right, and leads to commoditization. That's some of the things I've heard. Is that correct?
100%.
All right, lovely. Let me pick up the couple of things that are sort of easily dealt with. So on the question of price discrimination, which is actually an economics term, can I price differently for different countries or based on the willingness to pay or ability to pay? So the answer is 100% yes. Amazon does it. Everybody does it. As long as the markets don't talk to each other, and as long as the people you sell to in one market can't trade and sell back into your market, which is also hard to do because people don't necessarily share each other's customer bases, you can definitely, and you should price on willingness and ability to pay. And that's for two reasons. One is affordability, right? What people in Bangladesh can afford is very different from what people in UK can afford. And the second is perceived value. What does the product do for their lives, and how important is the job to be done in their lives that they're willing to serve? Is it a real need? Is it an itch? So those are the kind of things that you need to do out here. So for example, in Japan, everybody is required to enhance what is an earthquake kit. So there's a torch, there is biscuits, there's water, right? So if there's an earthquake, because they're facing a typhoon at the moment, if there's an earthquake, their ability to hunker down and survive for 1 week without getting out of their flat is really, really important, right? So there is, so there is a captive market for this particular thing. It isn't there over here in the UK. So the answer is yes. And it goes back to Yamama's point also. You should use your substitute products or similar products or indirect competition to drive your benchmarking strategy. Now, one of the professors who was co-teaching a different course with me and says, how do you arrive at a starting point, right? Take this as a joke. You say, you go into the market, you don't know how to price. You're trying to say the price for this is $1,000, right? And then you wait for a reaction. If they fall off the chair and think it's too expensive, then you turn around and say, but for you, sir, we will charge only 800. So that's one way, right? We just see the reaction because that's giving you value and use. If they don't fall off the chair, then you turn around and say, it's $1,000 for this year, just for you. Tomorrow, next year, we will be back to our normal pricing at 2,000. So it's a very iterative kind of thing. And you need to be able to gauge a reaction out of that. That was a bit of a joke, tongue in cheek, but there's value in that statement. Because if you are in the B2B space, right, the pricing should be on perceived value. So perceived value is your ceiling as to what you can this thing. Your cost is your floor. And you have to charge as much as possible close to the perceived value. And that's where your challenge in communication lies out there. The other quick point I want to pick up is hardware is commodity, software is what's our value add. And I think you just want to take that one step further. You should price for the solution, not for the components. So I'll share somewhere in the presentation. There are many, many revenue models out there, and it's easily available. You can Google. So I'll just share. So I think you need to get out from this thing that I have to charge by meter to go into the pricing, simply because it's one thing I can calculate on out there. At a similar situation, there was an IoT company based in India that was tracking trucks that deliver, and there's a lot of issue in India where basically there's pilferage, there's a loss of things. People steal stuff. Right? You send something 100% and what arrives is 97%. Right? They want to track drivers, they want to do fleet management, and this person, the startup, was trying to do pricing based on what it cost him to put that piece of GPS equipment in. And the GPS equipment actually was commodity, was really, really cheap. Right? And that is a pricing mistake. Because you've got to work backwards from what does your solution save your customer to do, and therefore what do you feel is the right amount what is the fair amount you're willing to ask as a part of what you're saving them. So the term that I'm using, and there'll be a couple of slides on it, is called the quantified value proposition. What is the situation? And I'm talking B2B only right now. What is their situation as is? What is it costing them in terms of time, effort, money, loss, quality? When you come in with your 2B solution, what is the difference you can create in that? That's a quantified. So your value proposition is your sort of, you can do your value proposition on a value canvas, right? Pains, gains, jobs to be done, etc. The quantified value proposition takes them and converts them into numbers. And then you can go to the customer and say, right, in 6 months, you would be spending X, Y, Z on this. That's the kind of quality errors you have. That's the kind of returns. That's the kind of defects. That's the amount of time it takes. That's the labor cost. If we come in, we can do it at this. It'll save you that much money. And therefore, our pricing is a fair percentage of the value we are creating for you, right? So I think you need to start thinking in those terms, which will give you a little bit of a head start of getting beyond bill of materials and the quantity you save. And I think that's back to, if I can see the lady who was here, she's not on camera, but that's back to the point about I have a platform and it's a and they're pricing me down. And I think it's about shifting the conversation in West them. Right, somebody raised their hands. Was it Ali, you? Yeah, you're on mute, sir.
Yeah, that was me. Okay. Actually, I want to ask, do you recommend that this consideration to be taken in consideration only for the B2B, let's say, pricing strategies? What I mean that you're pointing that we need to study, let's say, the real customer case, the real market and his customer case, and what value you can add for your customer, and to be calculated as what exactly you can save him or adding a value for him in figures. So you could, let's say, manage your pricing depending on the value that you're really delivering to that customer. Is that right?
Absolutely correct.
Yeah, okay.
We use the term, what's the value we're creating, right? But if you unpack that, it's usually about the fact, what's the time, effort, money you're saving them? Because what you're doing is that you are helping them solve a problem in a slightly different way. You're not solving a new problem for them. You're probably solving an existing problem in a more novel way, which is either more efficient, or is less of a nuisance, or is transparent, or saves time, it saves money, saves environmental damage, saves reputation, all of those things, right? So whatever is a combination of the things, whatever is the number you can put it at, and that's a quantified value proposition. We use the word value add, but it is a combination. I will share a couple of resources. I'll share the quantified value proposition from Bill Ollitt's book. I will share that in the chat, or share it with Nadine, and she can send that out to you out there. So if Omar, your hand is up, you still want to pick that up?
Yeah, thank you for the great advice. But what if we are selling B to B to C? We can't clarify our value for our end customer because we are selling B to B, and then the business that we are selling our product to is going to market our product to the real consumer. It's very hard to give the final user how is the software giving our solution a value when they are buying from the business that bought our solution.
Okay, so you say you're in a B2B2C market, yeah?
Yeah.
Right. So I think let me also create one more distinction, which is quite misunderstood in this world, right? We think we either B2C or B2B, right? In reality, most of your B2B businesses are B2B to B2B to C, or B2B to B2C, or B2B to C, or B2B to C. Whatever it is, it's a combination, right? Because, for example, if you are a manufacturer of the cycle frame, right, just a 3-part frame of the cycle, you have the choice of going to the OEM. So you can decide where in the value chain close to the end customer do you want to go. Do you want to go to the OEM? Do you want to go to the distributors that sell it to the large cycle stores? Do you want to go to a cycle store chain directly and put it as this thing? Do you want to go to an aftermarket, or do you want to directly go to the end consumer by creating an online presence and getting them to swap out what they're doing, right? So you have this entire choice in the entire thing. So that's the first thing that I want to do. The earlier you're up in the food chain, it's less risk for you, but your margins are also much smaller. The closer you are to the customer, it's more risk for you. It's a greater investment of customer education, or probably even greater competition, but your margins are much larger, right? So that is that. So one of the things in your commercial strategy is, where is your sweet spot, depending on your propensity for risk, how much you want to invest, how much you want to spend in marketing effort. Do you want to settle in a B2B business that eventually sells to the end consumer? That's one thing, one distinction I want to do, difference between B2B and B2C. B2B is never really B2B clear. It is somewhere around a value chain that finally hits an end customer. The second thing is, if you're finding difficulty in dealing with your current customer who's in the B2B chain, you can always go up the food chain to see if that's going to work better for you. And you can always go up in the food chain to create the demand back so that your current customer sees value. So sometimes your marketing efforts are towards the end consumer. So they see this product has a particular demand, but it's being sold by someone else. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, right. I'm going to move on back to the content and to answer Yamama's point. When markets don't talk to each other, in the sense that if you've sold a book for 99, with the equivalent of 99p in India, right, that person can't sell it back to someone in the UK. That's when I mean the markets don't talk to each other, right? The markets are not a part of a community forum where they're sharing pricing. Yeah, that's when I mean the pricing discussion out there. Okay.
But is there any way, Viren, to yeah, let's say to make a kind of separation between the markets, so you can make sure that there is no access for the pricing between different markets or regions, so you will be free to, let's say, make different calculations depend on the region and the market itself?
Right. So to your point, then, if I understand correctly, you're saying I'm trying to sell online, and I don't want someone to come in and see that I'm charging, 10p for Kenya, and I'm charging 50p for Oman, which will upset the Omanis. So there you have to do a little more. Because you're selling online on one platform and you're not selling through distributors who are not talking to each other. Then you've got to use your internet IP addressing based strategies. Go onto the website. I recognize you're from Kenya. Please go to the Kenya website. Blah 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 blah. Then you got to do those kind of things to do differential pricing. Yeah. Cool. So let's just come back to the session. Are we back on my screen? Yeah, cool. Right. Quickly, and you don't need to try to, how do you actually know that your competitor's price is really coming in the way of you getting revenues? So we talked a lot about competition. What is the evidence you have that actually it's your competitor's pricing that's actually stopping you? Any takers? You can fire up in chat. Let me flip this on its head. It'll become clear. When is a competitor's price good for you? I'm going to come off share. And I'm going to ask you, when is a competitor's price actually good for you? I've completely flipped it on its head. Who wants to go first? Guys, you're welcome to be off mute as long as you're not standing next to a train station and it's not noisy. Just stay off mute. That's absolutely fine.
So we are free to talk.
Yeah.
Perfect. Actually, I think the competitive price could help me once it's either too cheap or too low or too high. If it's too low, mainly that indicates that they are offering a kind of a cheap stuff or a very low value. And this is one case. The other case, if it's really high, so you could go for a fair price and provide maybe much more competitive price for your customer with a good value at the same time. So in those two cases, I will get use of my competitor pricing. That's for me.
Right. So, I mean, what you basically talked about was that it's really good to see if it's too low or too high, and it'll give me some sort of a wiggle room to see where I might want to position my product, right? That's number one.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yes, go ahead.
Hello. Yes, I would also add maybe an opportunity to differentiate your product or service to kind of accentuate your value proposition. Whether it's whether your price is lower or your price is higher.
Right. Anybody else? Omar?
Yeah, I think when your value is worth like $200, and then you have a large competitor that's already selling on a higher price, they are going to normalize what a high price is. So if my value is 200 and they are selling in 1,000, it's normal for me to sell in 500. In the same way, my value is 200, but they normalized what a flagship price is. I think this is when my competitor price come value for me.
Absolutely. So here is two reasons, right? When the price is good for you. One is it first tells you that there is a market for the product. A lot of times when you're in startups, now this is where this is going to be the sort of mindset shift, right? A lot of times when you're going into markets, right, and you're worried about competitors, the presence of a competitor signals that there is actually a room, there's a demand for the product. Somebody else has solved that problem for you, right? If there's a competitor and they're selling, that means there's a demand, there's a customer need, because that's one of the hardest things to solve for startups. A lot of startups fail because they solve a problem nobody needs solving. So the one good thing about having a competitor in your space, if at all, is to establish that there's a market need, because that is one of the most expensive things to do for the startup. And the other thing to do is that it allows you to piggyback and do marketing successes based on them. So we've had a few innovators out there that have used hashtags. So they had a healthier coffee alternative, energy drink, which didn't have caffeine, but had the same effects, was different kind of materials. And they used Starbucks hashtags to piggyback their marketing. And they were able to, by piggybacking their marketing with Starbucks, back to your benchmarking, they were able to anchor on Starbucks prices. So you got two examples of products out here that were able to really use the market strengths and presence of other people and get into the market out there because they were able to anchor prices and positioning. Yeah. Now, here's the big thing, right? Unless you're competing with Google and Apple, or unless you are competing with the 2 or 3 mobile phone companies in your region that have got 95 or 99% of the market share, your biggest competition is not your competitor as you see it. Your biggest competition is a customer, is your non-customer. The person whose attention you need to grab to become your customer. Let me say this again. Unless you're in a completely saturated market, right, where 95% of the market is being taken, and what you win as business is somebody else's loss, right? And the pie is relatively fixed. Or, as you guys love to use the word, you're in a red ocean, right? Competition is less of a problem than you think. Competition does a couple of good things for you, right? It establishes that there is a customer need. It allows you to do benchmark on pricing, which we discussed earlier. It allows you to do creative marketing strategies. It anchors prices in the minds of the customer if the competitor is well established. Then you can use their pricing standards if they're suitable to you and your differentiation to come into the market. Yeah. Is that clear? That makes sense? Yeah. Good. So just getting back to sharing. Yeah. So we've kind of discussed this. I won't go into the activity for which company do you think a competitor's pricing is not a problem? Right? For which company do you think competitors' pricing is not a problem?
In the chat, Yamama says Google, Apple.
Right? Exactly. The companies with so deep resources that they can come around and just launch a new product and burn endlessly till they burn you out. I mean, Amazon spent 300 million on the Fire tablet when it was a complete failure, right? And they could write it off. Apple has actually come in more recently, competing with Klarna. What it's done is that it's said on Apple Pay, you can go 3 or 4 installments, interest-free completely for a period of time. And anybody who was like a PayPal who was going to charge 16% interest for doing installment payment suddenly has their advantage wiped out. Now, whether it's wiped out or not, we'll discuss that later because there's a behavioral element to it. Yeah. But those are the kind of companies where it does not matter. So unless you're in a red ocean, competitive fear or pricing fear is absolutely not warranted. Yeah. So another question for you, right? We know sports. We know football. What's the difference between winning in football and winning in business?
Maybe in football there is one winner, but in business maybe we can all win.
Fantastic. For football, there is one winner unless it goes to a penalty shootout. But yeah, so that's absolutely a fair point. And business, all win in the sense that you could expand the pie, you could collaborate. That's that. What else?
I think one of them is a short-term winner, and the business is like long going, maybe.
Also, I think it's in football. There's a clear way to win. That's scoring more goals. In business, there is no such a thing.
Ah, you're getting close. So let me go back to the previous point, right? Football also may not be short term, right? Because you can lose a game today and you're in a league and you have more round robin matches and there's a chance to catch up. Same thing in business. You lost a deal today, but your reputation is holding in the long run. Maybe you'll win in the future, right? So we've got that. So that's kind of kills similar. So Omar's point here is right. Football, you said, is scoring more goals against the competition, yeah?
Yeah,
And
it's obvious how to win.
It's obvious how to win. You're scoring more goals for the competition. And in business, using the same analogy in business?
Yeah, there is no such criteria to win in business.
Anybody wants to add to that?
You can find a niche market or a competitive advantage. So you can compete in another way in the market.
Right. So my question still remains the same. How do you win in business? We know how we win in football, right? We win in football by scoring more goals against our competitor. Do we win in business by scoring more goals against our competitor? Yes. Rizek.
Probably making the right choices at the right time, picking the right choices at the right time. So this is how I see like we can win in business.
No, so that's a strategy. But what's the definition of winning, right?
Revenue?
Yeah, what's the definition of winning? I mean, if an alien dropped onto the earth, right, and he was seeing a football game and somebody said, this is how football is played and the winner will be decided by who's got more goals.
So I think,
profitability.
I think winning's definition depends on your overarching goal. Because for instance, Yamama said conversion rate. Some CEO might tell you our market share, acquiring more market share. So other CEO enhancing bottom line impact. So it depends on which era are you at.
Good, right. So I get it, right? So what you're talking about is how do I want to be measured as an aggregate company? Am I going for market share? Am I going for profitability? Amazon goes for market share. Apple goes for margin, right? Right. So here is something that I want to play back to you, right? In football, you win by scoring more goals against your competitor. In business, you win by scoring more goals for your customer than your competitor can do. Do you see the shift? In business, your job is to convince the customer that you're creating, and you've used these words right through, I'm just replaying them back to you, right? Is to create more value for your customer than your competitor is able to do. So you're kind of indirectly competing with them. But what you're doing is you're competing for your customer to buy your perception that you're creating more value for them than your competitor does, right? You don't go and beat the competition down, you win for your customer, right? That is the fundamental difference between a sport like football and a sport like business. And that allows you to create more value, and back to your terms, more people can win, expand the pie, collaborate, etc. Right? You couldn't have a football game where you turned around and said the captains met at halftime, the score was 0-0, and they say, you know what, let's not play anymore. Let's collaborate and both be declared winners, right? It wouldn't work. But it's a possibility in business, right? So the fundamental thing here is this notion that you are scoring more goals for your customers than your competitors, right? So it's pricing for customers rather than against competitors. There's a mindset about competitors and not. So this is something I want you to sort of start focusing on, right? Your non-customers are really, that's the attention you're competing for. And starting, we've discussed this in a bit of detail, right? Starting with a completely different business model that does not allow for direct competitive comparison is one of your biggest advantages of direct things. So pricing by meters, pricing on margin, pricing on bill of materials are the kind of things that will sort of get you into more trouble than if you were priced in a different business model. So one of your big advantages is your business model. So when I come back and share out there, right? Unless every potential customer in your markets, I'm going to say this really slowly, right? Unless every potential customer in your market knows both you and your competition intimately well, and can directly compare your offerings on a like-to-like basis, unless that all of that is true, you're unnecessarily worrying too much about competition. Sometimes, here's a different question, right? Sometimes you don't know what your competitor's pricing strategy is. If you don't know what your competitor's pricing strategy is, how does the market know? A lot of times we go into the market, your customer does not know about your competitor simply because your customer does not even know about you. Your customer doesn't know about you. You don't know little about your competitor. You can do market research and find out a little about your competitor. So unless it's really, it's like Vodafone competing with the local company and the prices are all public and everybody has a mobile phone, we can worry a little less about that. Guys, I wanted a big thing, right? Scoring for the customer rather than against the competitor. Notion that your non-customer is really where you need to compete for attention. And the fact that if you don't know your competitor, chances are the market or the customer does not know your competitor out there, right? Unless it's the two of you or the three of you who are on the table every time you're trying to do a deal, the competitive fear is unwarranted. All good? Yeah. So what's common about all the streaming services that we see right now? You got Netflix, you got Amazon, you got a whole range of other stuff.
The business model, more or less, the business model.
They all follow the same. I think, Razak, you're probably in a noisy area, my friend.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. They all follow the same business model. They're all at $9.99 a month. If it's not $9.99 a month, it's $7.99 a month. They all follow the same business model. So I'm going to share with you in chat, right, either now or a little later, I'm going to share with you an HBR article on that. Why do all streaming services follow the same business model? Now, how could you do something differently? So if you were a streaming service coming into the space, how would you operate differently?
There are several ways we can do it. We probably can, for instance, have some exclusivity and price per movie. And then we do like this exercise of how an average user consume, how many movies an average consumer consume a year. And then we charge per movie instead of subscription.
Fantastic. Lovely. Thank you for that. So, right, look at consumption patterns. Yamama, let's go for you. Right.
So I have a question actually. Like, should we even think about breaking that chain or that norm? Like if we have like 4 main competitors and they all have the same business model or pricing strategy, should we be different in the price, or is it better to have the same price and just
I'll come
go
back
with the flow?
I'll come back with that. Right. Anybody else wants to add to that? How much you compete in a market like this?
I think by making different price model for different countries, for different cultures, because in Europe, the salaries are much higher than the Middle East. So $9.99 a month is too much for a student in the Middle East, but it's nothing for a student in the States. So I think different prices for different countries may be a solution.
Okay. But, I agree with what you're saying, but actually what you're saying is that different strategies for different markets, right? But these guys have the same thing. They have the same strategy, right? In different markets, Amazon Prime charges its movies quite differently. So I think what have you touched on it, right? Why are we charging on what we're calling an all-you-can-eat model, where there may be different kind of usage patterns, right? There may be different usage patterns out there. There would be a class of customers sitting out there turning around and saying, hey, why should I pay $9.99 when I don't watch 30 movies, right? So one of the things that you can look at is extreme users, right? Or heavy users. So what you're doing, what this market is doing, it's charging everybody the same price based on what might be a heavy usage, and everybody's not a heavy usage. So if the number of users for a product or service are much lesser, right, there will be a subset of customers out there who will turn and say, why should I pay the same as a heavy user? Yeah, and they might have the mentality and mindset who will turn around and say, I'm actually subsidizing the cost because I'm streaming so much less for all the people who watch more movies. Yeah, so you can do pay-as-you-go pricing just as a particular alternative to the thing. To answer the question about, I think Yamama said, why don't I go with the flow and join the same business model, right? You can do that. And how do the streaming companies compete with each other? What is their tactic of competing? How do they avoid being commoditized?
Like, how do they compete with each other?
Say that again, I didn't get it.
Like, what's the question? How do they compete with each other?
How do they get each other's market share? How do they get market share?
I think it's a combination, like it's based on the service itself. Like, for example, the number of movies they have, for example, like Netflix versus another, like Disney, for example, platform. It's the price, it's the I don't know. I think it's this. It's the content of the platform. This is what they compete on.
The main reason you will join Apple TV, yeah, is when they launch a show called Ted Lasso. If you're a Netflix user and a Disney user, right, the one reason you might want to move to Amazon Prime is because they've launched Reacher, right? So when you have
it's the content, I mean.
Right? But it's not the content, right? Most of the content is commoditized, right? The same movies appear on both platforms. When you produce absolutely exclusive content is when you're avoiding the road to commoditization, right? And that's when people join these things. It's a very expensive thing to do. Producing original content that's going to be a blockbuster is a highly risky and highly expensive thing to do. So which is why competing in this market, this particular example is, unless you have really, really deep top pockets and the ability to experiment and do lots of shows, hoping something will become a hit, right, is a strategy where you can either shift the consumer or get people to have more than one streaming service. It's a very competitive space in that case. And I think
it's also related to the brand itself, no? Like, for example, people just love Apple, and for them, the cost of shifting is high, and they just have everything of their products are Apple, like their laptops, their phones, and so they have this loyalty to the brand, no?
Mm-hmm. And how many such companies do you know?
Sorry?
How many such companies do you know, like Apple, that have the same kind of following on the ecosystem?
Just Apple and Google.
There you are, right? So these are the exceptions and not the norm, right? It doesn't happen in the PC world, right? It doesn't happen in the PC world at all. Okay, right. So again, this is one of the things I want to do, right? And I'll drop it in chat, or I'll send. I think it's easier if I send it via Nadine, right? So I'll send you the HBR article on what could be different pricing models out there, and all of these are very big companies with very deep pockets, basically competing exactly on the same model. And sorry, sharing the wrong stuff. And this is something that we can definitely get away from. Oops. So now I am going to look at how you might want to deal with competition. So when you are definitely in a competitive space, right, you've established that, and I've shown you what the acid tests are. How do you deal with competition when it's definitely a problem? Yeah. Yeah. So no group activity, just quickly think about it in yourself, right? You're in a market with a lot of competitors, prices are known, customers can switch easily, right? Now I'm taking you completely onto the other side. How can you launch in a market like this? You note your product may be novel, but your market is not, right? Now I've taken you to the other side. You're in a competitive space, prices are published. You may have something new or unique, but the market pre-exists because the problem you're solving is well known and people have solved the problem before. Right? So this is genuinely what you would say is sort of a red ocean. So how would you compete in a market like this? You got to cutting your costs. You got to work top down. Yeah. What else do we have? Cost leadership. So we have cutting costs. Let me just pick up some of this chat, right? Cutting costs, collaborating, site services, finding a sub-problem to solve. Brilliant. And cost leadership. All good strategies. So let me just pick one by one up out there, right? Cutting costs, usually not a good strategy. And I'll tell you why, because when you cut costs, the first thing you're doing is eating into your margin. A 10% reduction on revenue could literally make a 50% reduction of margin. Because very simply put, you're buying, it costs you 80 to make, you sell it for 100, you find the market is not buying at 100, you reduce the price to 90, you were originally making 20, now you're making 10, right? Second thing that happens is when you cut costs and somebody else sees you cutting costs and they say cost cutting is now a new signal in the market, they cut costs and it can be a spiral down to the bottom. Yeah. It's not theoretical, it's happened massively in India. So Vodafone and Airtel, two mobile providers, had very, very comfortable pricing. Jio from Reliance, one of the biggest companies in India, came and launched Jio as a mobile phone service in 2016. They priced it so low, it has completely ruined the market. There are markets in Africa where Vodafone is getting out because the mobile phone pricing has become so commoditized that it's not even viable for them to put up the infrastructure to do that, right? Moving to subscription services, fantastic. Site services, so finding a niche problem that's not being solved, fantastic. So that's a good way of differentiating. The second one that I wanted to pick up on, so I wanted to pick up cost cutting and I want to pick up cost leadership. Cost leadership means that you are something like a Walmart or an Amazon or a IKEA or what are the other examples? Or supermarkets like Aldi or Lidl, or there are some in Gulf, and there's like there is Landmark, for example, for Chlorine. So when you're doing cost leadership out there, you've got to bear in mind you have to be operationally very efficient, and you have to be very large scale for that to be a profitable business, because your margin of error is very small. So cost leadership is a strategy that we are a Ryanair or a low-cost provider out there. But bear in mind, because you're so tight on margins, right, out there, right, and and it's kind of given that if you're pricing low, you're pricing close to cost, right? And you can still be very, very profitable. It's not the thing. But what I'm saying, your margin of error has to be very, very. So it requires a lot of operationally effectiveness and efficiency out there. It's not a thing that you can take easily in this particular space. So let's look at some other strategies. So thank you so much for sharing. Let's look at some other strategies that you might want to look at if you're pricing in a hugely competitive space. So one is value curves. The other one is bundling, false consumption, and business model innovation. I'll go through each one of these out there, right? So value curves is really serving different segments that have different value expectations. So there are a bunch of people traveling out of Bradford and Manchester who are very happy to travel at £19.99 for a European destination and don't mind paying for coffee and don't mind carrying their own luggage and don't mind queuing for us, because what they really enjoy is the ability to say that I flew very cheaply to a foreign country. And equally, there are customers out there that find the experience is really, really important, don't want to stay in queues, want to be given food or drink on the table, right? So you're serving completely different value segments. And that's what brought out the, Southwest Airlines was one of the earliest ones out there, and that was brought out the no frills airline business, and it basically expanded the market. Because what the no frills airline did is it did not steal all the business from bigger airlines. What it did was people who would normally get into cars and drive from Manchester to Leeds or whatever it is, or in the US, started taking planes. It brought in non-customers who were going to be commuting by different modes of transport. So that's value curves. The session, we can't cover value curves in this, but your blue ocean strategy is very much about this. It's about doing value curves, finding out, what are the 8 to 10 things that the customers value the most, and is that something we can differentiate on? The second thing was bundling. Right. So the way to do bundling, and this was the lady who spoke about the platform business, for example, right? So is one way to avoid commoditization. So if what you're doing is have the one service in there that is absolutely unique and the customer definitely wants. So I remember when BT launched BT Sport, what they had to go and do was win some premiership deals, so that if you wanted to watch that, they had to come. And they did not give the pricing by saying, if you pick this, pick this. There was one price for everything. So bundling and not unpacking how your price is given avoids commoditization. So one example, and Adobe has done this recently, Adobe's Photoshop has direct competition with lots of stuff that's almost free to use. Same thing with desktop. So what is done now, one big bundle at 50, where you get more than what you need, but it's at one big price. You can't unbundle it. So bundling is one way of doing it. The third is false consumption. Now I have a mobile phone deal that gives me 250 gigabits per month. There's no way I can use it in this country, especially when I'm in Wi-Fi most of the time sat behind a Zoom, right? But that's the way they communicate into the market, and that's the way they compete on value features that the customers think that they really like and say, wow, I'm getting a 250 gig deal. But they don't have to price to serve the customer for that, because very few customers actually hit that boundary. And the last one is business model innovation. So what's unique about these three things, folks? These three products and services that are being sold.
That I buy you the machine, that you buy the machine, but my profit is from the capsules or from the ink. That's all.
Yeah. So basically, it's on consumables, right? So people, so I mean, I think the queue is in the one on the right hand side. It's called the razor and blades model. The razor is free, the blades are charged. I mean, I bought my laser printer for £150, and it cost me £90 to replace the ink cartridges every time it out, right? So they make money on the ink cartridges. Nespresso machines are literally free to buy. They cost you £1, at least in this country, but you buy it with an 18-month subscription out there. So what if you'd ask for it? And what is the categories of revenue models? So here's an example of revenue models that will get you out of this thinking that I'm being compared by on meters, or I'm being compared on transaction, or they're telling me what is it costing you to do it. I'll just give you a minute or so to absorb. Yeah. A lot of companies make money simply on referrals because they know that acquiring, the cost of acquiring a customer is very, very high. That makes sense, guys? I'll just summarize it for you. If you're in an area with high competition, price on attributes that the customers think is really valuable, but you don't necessarily, or your probability of having to serve that, which is false consumption, right? Probability of having to serve that is very, very low. So, which is one of what the mobile companies do. Unlimited text is one simple example. Unlimited calls. You cannot make unlimited calls on your phone, right? You know, we just don't do that anymore, right? You can do it by value curves, which is a blue ocean strategy, right? Which is differentiating. And you said that, right? Finding a sub-problem want to solve. And also markets have preferences. There are people who like doing a deal every time. There are people who do not want nuisance, right? So you can distinguish, you can further segment the market in that. The third thing is bundling. So if you're providing, a lot of you doing a platform services, and this is really moving from software sales and hardware sales to solution sales, where you do a full bundle price. Bundle price where the customer can't unpack the price to turn around and say, what is each element that you're costing, right? But your main thing is you need to have sufficient value in that. Yeah. Okay. And the last one, really the big one, the big one is business model innovation, because that's where you avoid direct competition. So if you're a recruitment company and the margin is 7% and they're asking you to do 5%, right? You turn around and say that our recruitment company for a fixed price will provide you this particular services and a free replacement out there, and you just do it in a completely different model. Or our recruitment company will charge you on number of candidates that you interview, not based on success, and we will just charge you by candidates presented, not candidates selected. Right? All it takes is a bit of creativity and courage to think differently. The 17 or 18 models I shared with you are published. They're from Bill Ollitt's book, for example, and I will share that with you. Okay, I don't want to give resources on this because you start reading it while I'm talking and we've got 10 minutes to go. So I just wanted to just put that out. And the last bit that I want to cover on here is now moving from the rational pricing to behavioral pricing. Yeah, so come some elements out there. And then we'll take, we'll take 5 minutes and we'll do some more Q&A and we'll decide what we're going to do that after next. Yeah, okay. Cool. And sharing the screen. This is my most fun part. So this is popcorn that you would normally find, yeah, in a store. And it's for £5, whether it's GCC countries or MENA or India or UK or USA. It's the same thing that's happening, right? £5 for a bag of popcorns, literally half the price of a cinema ticket. It is really, really hard for them to sell, yet they want to sell at that price. How could you make the pricing of this more effective? I can't see the chat, but you are shout it out on this, on the screen, guys.
I think if you give them a reference to compare the price.
Ah, lovely. Reference compared with the price, right? Reference compared with the price. And Caroline has a wonderful one, which is bundle it with a drink, right? Bundle it with a drink. This is expensive, but if you turn around and say it's £5.50 with an unlimited Coke, right? Suddenly the deal looks brilliant, doesn't it, Caroline? And that's what they do. right? And you said reference price. And this is what they do. They put something very, very small, close to the same thing price. Now, $3.95, now that looks a lot more expensive. Therefore, the one at $4.95 that's big doesn't look too bad, does it? It's a pricing strategy. We human beings are creatures of comparison. So if you're finding something that's looking expensive and we are shown something else in comparison that allows us to compare and make a decision, this is how they do it. And this is why, unfortunately, countries like the USA, which have been built on the consumption model, overconsume, because this is how pricing is done out there.
This is what I wanted to say, like, even they don't finish, or we don't finish the size. However, we always buy the big one.
We always buy the big one,
because
right?
we think it's cheaper.
Yeah, because we think it's cheaper, right? So this sort of pricing, which is done a lot in the US, right? Which is why in the United States of America, people eat a lot more, have more TVs than they need, and have bigger houses they have use for, because that's the way, you know, that's how the consumption economy has been worked. So that's one of the other things out there. So one way that you might want to look at competitive pricing is give choice to the customer on your own.
Is it similar to anchoring, Viren?
It's anchoring, right? So you anchor up. So if you go into the, if you're worried about competition, go to the customer and say, listen, so you know, my price for recruitment per candidate, for argument to say, is £100, right? Sorry, my price. Sorry, let me say this again. My price for recruitment of a candidate is £100 with a 3-year warranty. If the candidate leaves, then we'll do a free replacement. Or if you don't want the guarantee, it's £95. The customers suddenly find the £100 deal with a 3-year warranty a lot more attractive than if you only put that alone on the table. Do you agree with me? Because they will be comparing it directly with 95 and so what, 95, what if the guy leaves within 2 months of my joining? I have to go through the same process again and spend another 95. But if I spend 5% more, I get a 3-year guarantee. So it's creating comparisons, giving the customer choice and agency in your own space becomes very important. Economists did this. They said you can buy, this is not a joke. They said you can buy a print subscription for $100. An online subscription for $100 per year, a print subscription for $125 a year, and a print and online subscription for $125 a year. Exactly the same price as print. What do you think people went for? Everybody went for print plus digital. Whereas if they'd only put print plus digital for $125, they wouldn't have had that many customers because they created their own internal competition and comparison. Another one is that you must understand that in your market, there are ceilings. It's not elastic demand and supply. There are mental models where shoes above £99 or software over $9.99 suddenly becomes more expensive and your demand completely drops when you cross a barrier, right? So in your markets, you have to recognize that there will be mental models and price ceilings, which is why software is priced like this. And by the time I built this, Adobe was pricing like this, and Adobe has done something completely different now. Now it's just put one Creative Studio bundle at 50 quid or whatever, 75 quid. It's combined everything together. You can't unpack them. Third thing, value for money is not the same as affordability. We always confuse the two. Value for money is, are we providing enough value in the price? Affordability usually is, what's the pricing plan? So the example on the right-hand side is of a company that was trying to rent solar lamps by the month to people, couldn't do that. All they did is rented them by the day, because a person could afford to pay 10 rupees a day, could not afford to pay 300 rupees in one go, because the 10 rupees a day would be taken out of their earnings. So again, deal with value for money, and then you can do pennies a day pricing. And pennies a day pricing basically is, you say this service costs you 59p a day or £75 a month, blah 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 blah. And Dropbox does this very well. because it says we'll charge you £12 a month or £100 a year. So depending on whether you're a company, you either want to save money or you want to save cash flow, you are able to choose, right? So value for money is not the same as this thing, right? So that's what I wanted to cover off in this particular thing. So the one thing that I'm going to ask you, and I'll share the resources, the slides will be there with you. I will also in a day send you a summary document of everything that we've discussed, which you can use as an aid memoir, which will have a little more written. So it's 2-3 pages. So it's very, very useful out there. I'll send you an article from Bill Ollett on how to do quantified value propositions. Yeah, which is basically value and use things. So these are the 3 things I will get across to you. We're coming towards the end of our allocated slot, and I'm sure Core will have their own little sort of M&E to be done. But what I want to get off from you guys is, what's been your biggest takeaways from this session? If you just want to put it in chat. Things you didn't know, or things that you picked up and you might affect the way you might approach the market. Let's get a sense of that. Shifting attention, pricing is an art, not a science. Yes, it's got all the behavior elements in it. Yeah. Attention from competitors to customers and creating value. Thank you, Jimana. Quantified value proposition that I'll include in my decision matrix. Really, really useful. And there's a guy called Nirmalya Kumar, who's now at the University of Singapore Management University, wrote the book called Value Merchants. And this is really about demonstrating the value you create for customers in a real tangible numbers manner. Welcome, Emma. Thank you. Anchoring, very important for comparison. Bundle it with the drink. So anchoring out there. Anything else that you picked up, which has shifted the way, it's not just what you've learned, which might have shifted the way that you will approach your pricing model in the future? Right, absolutely. B2B strategy, focus on think, create. If people don't know about the competitive price, then we don't need to worry about it. It's not your job to bring your competition onto the table. Let the customer do the hard work. All of us do something called satisficing. It's a term that is coined 55 years ago by Herb Simon, right? The first optimal solution that we find that's good enough, we settle for. We do not have the time, energy, and resources to do a complete search for all the competitive products and do that, because a lot of the time, our time is limited. We want to get 2 or 3 people onto the table, have a little bit of a chat, and choose between them. That's how the business world works. If I had to go and look at project management software, time management software to see which is the best one for my company, I'll stop at the first 3 that fit my thing. I won't keep searching. Anything else? Right, we're I think on the time. Over to you. So Nadine, back to you.
Thank you so much for this interesting and informative session, Viren. And thank you to everyone for being very involved and engaged. It was really a great session, and hope to have you again soon.
All right, lovely. Lovely. All right, thank you guys. Catch up soon. And like I said, I'll get the resources across to Nadine. She should probably have them for you for tomorrow. Yeah, out there. All right. Ciao for now. Thanks a lot.